welcome to this final episode in our series on the Lord's Prayer. Today we're looking at the final phrase of the prayer, "For yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." As I pointed out at the end of last week's episode, this final phrase of the prayer is not in the Bible. It's part of the prayer in sort of orders of services in churches, and generally when the Lord's Prayer is prayed, this section is included. But if you actually look in the Bible, this section of the prayer is not included. So what's going on? The first thing is that this part of the prayer is not included in the earliest manuscripts that we have for the scriptures. And when the researchers and scholars come to translate the Bible, they always want the earliest manuscripts so that those are closest to the time of Christ. And quite often we think that everything is absolutely fixed in stone. Of course, faith, hopefully, is always changing and evolving. So if you think of the disciples during the time that Jesus was their teacher walking on earth, the faith that they had there was remarkably different to the faith they had when they met him risen from the dead. And the faith they had when they met him risen from the dead was also quite different to their faith after the day of Pentecost. And most of the New Testament is made up of letters from St. Paul. I think he wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament. And if you read Paul's letters, a lot of them are about some controversy or other, some disagreement or other. What do we think about this? You know, that the Judaism said this, but Jesus said this, so what's the solution? What's the answer for people that follow Christ? So when the gospel spread to the non-Jewish world, a controversy arose about whether those those non-Jewish converts needed to do all the things in the Old Testament. In the Jewish scriptures, do they need to be circumcised, for example? And that was a debate, and it was worked out, and the church decided no, they didn't have to be circumcised. So as the early days of the church went on, prayers like the Lord's Prayer and other prayers that the Christians used may have developed over time. And initially they would have been passed down orally from different groups of people. And it may just be as simple as this. If you think about it, the Lord's Prayer in the Bible begins with Our Father, begins with God. And the version we have in the Bible ends with deliver us from evil. So evil is the last word. And we never want evil to be the last word, because we believe that God always has the last word. So the Pharisees and the religious authorities of Jesus' day, and indeed the Roman Empire, thought that crucifying Jesus and killing him, putting his body in a tomb, they felt that was the last word, but that was the last word of man. But Easter Sunday tells us that Christ, raised from the dead, came out of the grave, and that was the last word. That was God's last word. So God always has the last word, and God's last word is always better than the human last word. So it makes perfect sense, as Christians were sharing this prayer, to be uncomfortable with the prayer ending on the word evil. And so they formulate this, what's known as a doxology. It's a hymn or an expression of worship, giving thanks to God. So the doxology was tagged on the end, "For yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever." So now the prayer with this addition on the end, it's like it begins with God and it ends with God. And that's it's a more uplifting, if you think of the flow of the prayer. It begins with God, ends with God, is a more uplifting prayer. And the other example we have, that our faith should always be growing and developing, that we should be learning more. And as we go year by year, our faith should grow and be a little bit different from what it was 5 years ago. And the example of that is Paul saying he had kept the faith. Now, when some people talk about keeping the faith, if you listen to them, it sounds really what they're talking about is like putting faith in a museum where nothing moves, nothing changes. But if you look at Paul's statement, just prior to saying he'd kept the faith, he says he'd fought a fight and run the race and kept the faith. Now, if you're looking for a fight or a race to run, You don't go to a museum. Fighting, and although I don't understand that one, and racing, these are sort of professional sports that people earn a lot of money through, and it's very hard to get to the top of those things. But that's the picture that Paul uses, that he's fought the fight and presumably won, and he's run the race, and he's expecting a prize, and he's kept the faith. So as we go through life, there will be struggles and fights with our faith. We will feel sometimes that we're running, we might feel exhausted, but that's how Paul pictures living our faith, that we're always going ahead, moving forward. And so as the Christian world developed after the day of Pentecost, it was felt that we developed the Lord's Prayer by making it end where it started, with God. For the kingdom, the power and the glory are yours forever and ever. Amen. Amen means so be it. And so one final thought on the Lord's Prayer. I'll just leave this with you. I'll let you come up with the answer, because we don't know what the answer is. But is it the Lord's Prayer? Or is it the prayer of John the Baptist? Because Jesus comes out with this prayer when his disciples say, "Teach us to pray as John taught his disciples to pray." So is Jesus, who was originally one of John the Baptist's disciples by the look of it through history and archaeology, is Jesus teaching his disciples the prayer that John the Baptist taught his disciples? And of course we don't quite know the answer to that, but the question I'm asking is this a prayer that Jesus was already praying himself, that he'd formulated, or was it something that came out of the followers of John the Baptist that Jesus adopted and approved and passed on to his disciples? In a sense, it doesn't really matter. We know it as the Lord's Prayer. It's the prayer that Jesus prayed. But I'm always fascinated to sort of drill down in the scriptures and meditate and think about what the words actually mean. So there we have it. This is the final episode in this series on the Lord's Prayer. I hope you've watched all the episodes, and I hope they've been helpful. And do leave a comment, let me know what you felt about it. If you want me to do a series on something else, leave a comment in the comment section below. By the way, do sign up for our free monthly newsletter. You can find a link to the sign up form in the description of the YouTube video below. But in the meantime, as always, don't forget to give us a thumbs up on YouTube and hit the red subscribe button and the little bell icon. And I'll see you in another video that won't be about the Lord's Prayer.